June 6, 1944. 05:23 hours. Offshore beach, Normandy. HMS Roberts trained her twin 15-inch guns toward the German battery at Houlgate, perched on a cliff 300 feet above the coast. The battery was shelling Sword Beach. Roberts opened fire from 20,000 yards. Each shell weighed 1,938 pounds. Within minutes, the battery fell silent. Roberts was not a battleship. She was a monitor, a flat-bottomed, broad-beamed vessel that made barely 12.5 knots. She mounted a single twin turret recycled from a Great War monitor launched in 1915. Her draft was shallow enough to operate in coastal waters no battleship could safely enter. The same 15-inch guns that armed HMS Warspite, HMS Hood, and the Queen Elizabeth-class battleships, mounted on the cheapest hull the Admiralty could design. Maximum firepower, minimum cost, pure British pragmatism. And it worked. The idea baffled naval traditionalists. Every principle of warship design said you built balanced vessels, speed, armor, and firepower in proportion, all wrapped in a hull that could fight fleet actions. A Queen Elizabeth-class battleship displaced 33,000 tons, carried 8 15-inch guns in 4 turrets, made 24 knots, and cost millions of pounds. HMS Roberts displaced 7,973 tons standard. She carried 2 15-inch guns in 1 turret. She could not outrun a cargo ship. She had no business in a fleet engagement. Critics called monitors floating targets, too slow to maneuver, too lightly protected for surface combat, too few guns to matter. They were right about all of it, and they were asking the wrong question entirely. The right question was this: what did the Royal Navy actually need its heavy guns to do? The answer, across 2 world wars, was overwhelmingly the same: shoot at things on land, shore bombardment. Suppression of coastal batteries, fire support for amphibious landings. These missions did not require 33,000 tons of battleship steaming at 24 knots. They required the heaviest possible gun on the cheapest possible hull that could sit close inshore and deliver accurate fire for days or weeks at a time. That was a monitor. The concept traced back to the American Civil War, when USS Monitor proved a single turret on a low freeboard hull could deliver devastating firepower. The Royal Navy adopted the idea during the Great War, building monitors to bombard the Belgian coast, support operations at the Dardanelles, and shell German positions from Mesopotamia to the eastern Mediterranean. By 1918, British monitors mounted everything from 6-inch guns to a single 18-inch weapon on HMS General Wolfe. The concept was proven. When the next war began, the Admiralty revived it. The Great War Erebus class established the template. HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, launched in 1916, displaced 8,450 tons loaded. Their key innovation was mounting the twin 15-inch turret on a tall barbette, raising the guns high above the waterline. This extended the range of fire to 40,000 yards, roughly 23 miles. 23 miles! A monitor could sit beyond the horizon and drop nearly 1-ton shells on targets that could not see it, let alone shoot back. The Erebus class drew only 11 feet 8 inches of water, shallow enough to operate in coastal shallows where deep draft battleships risked grounding. Anti-torpedo bulges along the hull absorbed mine and torpedo damage. The design accepted every limitation: slow speed, poor seakeeping, minimal protection, in exchange for one thing: range. The guns could reach further than almost any coastal battery could reply. Erebus survived both world wars. By 1939, she was 23 years old, worn but still serviceable. Her sister Terror was sunk by Luftwaffe bombers at Benghazi in February 1941. The Admiralty needed replacements. On March 16, 1940, they ordered a new monitor, HMS Roberts, from John Brown and Company at Clydebank. She was laid down April 30th, 1940. Launched February 1st, 1941. Completed October 27th, 1941. 18 months from keel to commissioning, during the most desperate phase of the war. Her sister HMS Abercrombie followed from Vickers Armstrongs on the Tyne, completing in May 1943. The speed of construction reflected the elegant simplicity of the monitor concept. No complex armor schemes to engineer, no high-pressure turbines to install, no elaborate superstructure to fit out. Just a hull, a turret, and enough machinery to float and point the guns. Roberts's specifications told the story of deliberate compromise. 373 feet in length, 89 feet 9 inches in beam. That beam was extraordinary. Her length-to-beam ratio was barely 4-1. A fleet destroyer had a ratio of 9 or 10-1. Roberts was almost as wide as she was long, proportionally. This extreme beam gave her a stable gun platform, critical for accuracy when firing 15-inch weapons, and resistance to underwater damage, because the wide hull diffused blast energy from mines and torpedoes before it could reach vital spaces. 2 Parsons steam turbines produced 4,800 shaft horsepower, driving her to 12.5 knots maximum. Her turret was salvaged from the Great War monitor HMS Marshal Salt of the Marshal Ney class, refurbished and modernized to fit the new hull. Turret armor was 13 inches on the face, 9 to 11 inches on the sides. Belt armor was 4 to 5 inches, enough to withstand coastal battery splinters and near misses, not enough to survive a duel with a warship. She was not designed for duels. She was designed to sit offshore and destroy fortifications. The guns themselves were the heart of it. 2 BL 15-inch Mark I naval guns, 42 calibers in barrel length. Originally designed by Vickers in 1912 for the Queen Elizabeth-class battleships. Arguably the most successful heavy naval gun ever produced by any navy, wire wound construction. Each gun fired a 1,938-pound armor-piercing shell. Standard charge was 428 pounds of cordite, producing a muzzle velocity of 2,450 feet per second. Supercharge used 490 pounds of cordite, pushing velocity to 2,640 feet per second. In the Erebus-class turret on its tall barbette, these guns reached 40,000 yards, approximately 23 miles. In Roberts, with her lower mounting, maximum range at 30 degrees elevation was approximately 32,000 yards, roughly 18 miles. Rate of fire was 2 rounds per minute per gun. Each barrel had a firing life of 335 full charge rounds before relining. Roberts carried 70 rounds per gun, enough for sustained bombardment over several engagements. Her secondary armament was pure anti-aircraft defense. 8 4-inch guns in 4 twin mountings, 16 2-pounder pom-pom guns, 20 20mm Oerlikon cannon. Later, 8 40mm Bofors guns were added. No torpedo tubes, no anti-ship missiles. Every secondary weapon pointed at the sky. This was a ship that expected to be attacked from above while sitting stationary, firing at targets on land. The design accepted that vulnerability and armoured against it. Roberts' first combat tested the concept immediately. Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa, November 1942. She departed Gibraltar on October 22nd, escorting the invasion convoys. On November 8th, Roberts bombarded Vichy French coastal positions off Algiers, suppressing defences that would have shredded the landing craft. Her 15-inch shells did what no field artillery could, demolished concrete fortifications from miles offshore. 3 days later, anchored off Bougie, supporting follow-up operations, German aircraft found her. 2 500-kilogram bombs struck the ship, 1,100 pounds of high explosive each. Roberts survived. She was damaged, yes, but she floated, she fought fires, and she was repaired. She returned to action in time for Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily in July 1943, and Operation Avalanche at Salerno in September. If you are finding this deep dive into Royal Navy firepower interesting, a quick subscribe helps the channel and means you will not miss the next one. D-Day was Roberts' defining moment. Assigned to Bombardment Force D of the Eastern Task Force, she anchored off Sword Beach to support the British 3rd Infantry Division. At 0523 on June 6, 1944, she opened fire on the Houlgate battery. This was where the system that made monitors lethal came together. At ranges exceeding 10 miles, Roberts' crew could not see their targets. The shells vanished over the horizon, so the Royal Navy used spotter aircraft. RAF Spitfires and other observation planes flew over the target area, watched each salvo strike, measured the distance and bearing of the error, and radioed corrections back to the ship. The gunnery officer aboard Roberts adjusted aim. The next salvo landed closer. Within 2 or 3 corrections, nearly 1-ton shells were falling within yards of the aiming point. Controlled from the headquarters ship HMS Logs, Roberts systematically suppressed enemy batteries and strong points along the coast east of the Orne River. This was not spray and pray, this was precision demolition by radio relay. Later that day, Roberts' right gun burst its jacket due to a premature detonation in the bore, traced to faulty fuses in American-manufactured shells. HMS Erebus, firing at batteries near Barfleur and Le Pernel in support of Utah Beach that same morning, lost a gun to the identical defect. Both monitors had their damaged barrels replaced within days and returned to action. Roberts operated off Normandy for 7 continuous weeks, engaging targets in the Caen sector until July 25, 1944. She fired hundreds of 15-inch rounds during this period, each shell delivering the explosive equivalent of a heavy bomber's single bomb, but with far greater accuracy and available on call within minutes rather than hours. HMS Erebus fired 750 rounds across the entire Normandy campaign, achieving 30 confirmed direct hits from 130 rounds during the bombardment of Le Havre alone. The cost comparison between monitors and battleships was devastating. HMS Warspite carried 8 15-inch guns, but she displaced over 30,000 tons, required a crew of over 1,000, and was irreplaceable. She was too valuable to risk close inshore for weeks. Roberts carried 2 15-inch guns, displaced under 8,000 tons, and carried a crew of around 350. She was purpose-built to be expendable. In terms of 15-inch shells delivered on target per pound of construction cost, the Monitor was the most cost-effective heavy weapons platform of the entire war. 1 turret, 2 guns, a simple hull, weeks of sustained bombardment. A battleship's turret alone cost more than an entire Monitor. Roberts' most dangerous action came last. Operation Infatuate. The assault on Walcheren Island in the Scheldt Estuary, November 1, 1944. Walcheren commanded the sea approaches to Antwerp. The German garrison had fortified the island with over 20 artillery batteries in reinforced concrete casemates along the sea walls. Allied intelligence concluded that only 15-inch naval shells or 500-pound aerial bombs could penetrate these casemates. The bombardment squadron assembled HMS Warspite, HMS Erebus, HMS Roberts, 3 ships carrying 15-inch guns. The fleet sailed from Ostend and by 8:20 in the morning opened fire on German batteries around Westkapelle and Domburg. The Germans fired back. This was not long-range bombardment against a passive coastline. Coastal batteries targeted the bombardment ships and the landing craft carrying Royal Marine Commandos. The Naval Support Squadron pressed in close, suffering severe casualties. Roberts engaged the W-15 battery emplacement, firing salvos to silence the casemate that was shredding incoming landing craft. HMS Warspite, her propeller shafts still jammed from an earlier Fritz X guided bomb hit, could barely make 15 knots, but poured shells into the fortifications alongside the 2 monitors. Rocket-firing Typhoon fighter bombers from the RAF struck batteries that the ships could not suppress. The combination of 15-inch gunfire and close air support eventually broke the German defences. The Royal Marine Commandos established their beachheads. Walcheren fell within days. Antwerp opened for Allied shipping. The supply crisis of autumn 1944 was resolved. Between D-Day and Walcheren, HMS Warspite alone fired over 1,500 15-inch shells. Roberts and Erebus added hundreds more apiece. 3 ships, 2 of them monitors built around recycled Great War turrets, delivered more sustained heavy firepower in support of Allied ground forces than any other combination of vessels in the Royal Navy. One was a 30-year-old battleship. The other 2 were purpose-built gun platforms that together cost less than a single fleet destroyer to operate. Roberts survived the war. She was earmarked for the Far East in July 1945 to support Operation Mailfist, the planned liberation of Singapore. She was near Port Said when the Japanese surrender was announced on August 15th. She reached Kilindini Harbour in Kenya before being recalled in September. Her war was over. She served as an accommodation ship at Devonport until sold for scrapping in 1965. One of her 15-inch guns stands today outside the Imperial War Museum in London. That barrel, gun body number 102, was originally mounted on HMS Resolution in 1915, removed in 1938, relined, installed aboard Roberts for the Normandy invasion, fired at Houlgate on D-Day morning, a single weapon that served from the Great War to the liberation of Europe. 30 years of service, still effective, still hitting targets. The monitor concept died with the Second World War, replaced by carrier aviation and guided missiles, but for the specific mission of delivering sustained heavy firepower against fortified positions on land. Nothing in any Navy's arsenal matched the simple, brutal efficiency of a 15-inch gun on a cheap hull. Roberts proved it at Algiers, proved it at Sicily and Salerno, proved it for 7 weeks off Normandy, proved it under direct fire at Walcheren, 6 battle honours in 3 years of active service, 1,938 pounds per shell, 2 rounds per minute, up to 23 miles of range from the tall barbette of the Erebus class, all from vessels that cost less than a single turret on a modern battleship. HMS Roberts was slow, ugly, flat-bottomed, and built from recycled parts. She was also the most efficient delivery system for heavy explosive the Royal Navy ever put to sea. The Admiralty understood what the critics never grasped. You do not need a racehorse to knock down a wall. You need a sledgehammer. Roberts was that sledgehammer. British pragmatism, validated under fire.